Hardcore Gamer Supplemental. My name's Leigh. How are you? I'm well. You might recognize me from some of my own videos about Transformers and toys and culture. Board games are a real passion of mine. I've been lucky enough to be able to share some collaborative content for this channel and share some of my own experiences with board games. The topic I'm going to talk about today is the board element of board games. It's probably the part that a lot of people really take for granted, but also the part that people most associate with the board game. So whether it's something like chess, checkers, drafts, or Go, where you have a square with an amount of even geometrical spaces, or maybe a game like Monopoly where you have a board which has a track around the outside. These are the two most common types of boards that people associate with board games. Although definitely not the only type of board games that most people are experiencing, I think these two sum up most people's experiences when coming into board games, I think from especially their childhood and upwards. So on one hand we have a board which is a very themeless geometrical shape, so we have a square with some spaces in it, and this could represent all sorts of things, but really it is what it is. It's a field of squares that indicate individual spaces where game pieces can be placed. The other type of board is more the Monopoly style, or maybe the style that you might experience something like Game of Life or Candyland, which is a singular tray with spaces that go from, say, one to another number in a sequential order, and you'll move a pawn from place to place, generally with some sort of dice movement to indicate how far you go. This is what we call a roll and move. Now, Colin's covered this a little bit, and he's also talked about how theme and mechanics, how they are different but also integrated. So the board is an important part of the board gaming experience. Now, in contemporary board gaming, the board has evolved a lot to have a lot of different uses, a lot of different meanings, but also sometimes just be completely changed in maybe a way that you haven't imagined. So I'm going to talk about 4 different games today. I haven't thought too much about which games I chose. I went to my shelf, grabbed 4 games, and they will have very different implementations of the board. This game, The Resistance, a small little game here. This is a sci-fi traitor-based game. This is an interesting game that plays up to 5 to 10 players. Key Largo. This is more of a Euro game. It's an action selection worker placement game. Plays with 3 to 5 players. Trias. This is a Euro game. I believe it plays from 2 to 5 players. It's a bit more of a heavier abstract game. And finally, a very large and heavy game, Railroad Tycoon. Definitely a Euro game. Weighs a lot. So firstly, we're going to look at the board in The Resistance. Here it is. It's really quite small. On this board, it has a few markers for numbers, these are the turns, and then a few bits of information determining the type of different cards you use with different amounts of players. Because in this game, I'll open the box here, you have your rules, and you have a large pile of cards. Now fundamentally all this game is a card game. So you're probably thinking, well, should it be called a card game and not a board game? This is a bit of a grey area. Generally, I think it's safe to assume that any game which has a tableau or a space on a table or area or surface that you use where the game is played becomes in essence a board game. This is about a physical game that's played in a space. So the way you play your cards and your small board, it indicates that you're sort of still playing in an area or on a table or another surface. So the board in this game is very kind of, it's not really at the crux of the game at all. So whereas maybe in a game like the Game of Life or Monopoly, you're used to seeing the board as the pinnacle of everything, in this game the cards that are in your hand, they are the most important thing, similar to a traditional card game, and the board is just used to track information, sort of like a cribbage scoring board. The next game, Trias, is a very clever and interesting way of using a board. The board in Trias is here. It's a whole lot of little hex tiles. In the game of Trias, the goal is to score as many points by creating different land masses. As we see, to start off with, these tiles form one singular landmass. Now this isn't actually how the game is set out, this is just an example. So here we have a few different players with their different tokens. So we have a black player, a blue, a yellow and a purple player. In this game, it represents continental drift, so the forming of continents. So in a player's turn, they're going to remove a tile and then place a tile. So as you can see, there's nothing locked together here, it's all completely modular. So a tile must be removed from the outside and placed somewhere else. So you can see a tile could be placed here. The next player may place this tile and place it here, and so forth. And as you'll see, as the game goes on, the continents are going to start to break up. In a player's turn, they need to move these little dino meeples around. They'll score points, they'll breed, they'll grow larger packs, and then when one of these continents is removed from a larger continent, players score for having the most of their tokens on one of these new continents equal to the size of the continent. So this game, the board is consistently evolving and growing and changing the way that the players choose the way a game is played. This creates a really interesting environment where the board is actually dictated by the players as the game goes, but also part of the game is actually creating the board. This next board is from Key Largo, a game about diving and getting treasures from old shipwrecks. This board is maybe a bit similar to what you might expect normally. So as we can see, we have a large map of an island, and we have different sort of areas where things happen here. But unlike, say, a Monopoly where we have an obvious track where things happen, and there's no obviously sequential order in which all of the things happen, so how are these different spaces resolved? This is an action selection or worker placement game. These different places on the island represent different things people can do. So there's a bar where you can go and find new divers, get rumours. There's a market where you can sell treasure that you've got. There's a store where you can buy new diving equipment, diving bells, hoses, etc. The way that players choose which of these sort of options they're going to choose in the game is used by a card mechanic. Each player has a set of cards with these different options on them, and then secretly each player will place 2 cards down, face down, where no one else can see them. They'll choose their 2 actions for the turn. Now the challenge is, you don't know what other actions people are taking, but you're probably thinking, does it really matter? Well, in each of these spaces, there's different results for how many people choose to go there. So at the market, for example, if you wanted to buy a new trident, it'll cost $20 per trident, but if 2 players choose that option, then they're $30 each. 3 plus is $40 each. So how you choose your actions is very important, because you're always second guessing your opponent. Which is they going to take? When do I need to take this option to get the best out of it? The market, for example, where you sell your treasure, some of the options actually get better the more people go there, so predicting when other players are going to sell their treasure is really important. The last board I'm going to show you is the board from Railroad Tycoon. These are the Railroad Tycoon boards. They're folded up. This is the bottom of the map. This is the middle of the map. As you can see, they go together. There is another piece that goes on the top. This board is huge. You could lay a small child down on this board. As you can see with this board, well, you probably can't see very much detail, but it's a map of the eastern part of the United States. On this board are hundreds of little hex spaces indicating different areas. On these hex spaces are different things like terrain, so we may have mountains, or water, or towns. In this game, each player takes the role of a rail baron. The goal is to try and get as many points by making as much money as possible. To do this, you create routes between these 2 different cities. There's a bag of cubes that will distribute random cubes to each of these cities of different colours. As you can see, some of these cities are different colours. So we have little black cities and blue cities and red cities, and the cubes need to be delivered to those cities. So you have to build a train route, and you can use other people's train routes, and it costs money to build routes as well. And quite often you find yourself spending more than you have at the start to build those routes, and then you can start moving cubes to different cities. And those cubes have a value determined obviously by how many spaces they travel through different cities, because obviously that shows a demand. This game is a longer, more strategic Euro-based game about economy and systems and really trying to beat other players to the important routes and knowing where to extend and where not with your money. This is a little bit more of a heavier, serious game, and it's got a very large board, but to be honest, sometimes this board is actually a bit of a pain because it's really hard to fit on a table and it's a little bit unwieldy to see from side to side. all four of these boards represent really different ways of playing a game. This is obviously more of a linear way of representing a space in life. It's clearly a map, and these places are real places, and the spaces indicate the distance between them. This is more similatory or simulative. Are those words? I think they should be. But those experiences are what you get here. This is very similar to what we might imagine in real life. A game like Key Largo has a similar system in which we have a map, but here it's a little bit more abstracted, and the map represents different options and places without really having sort of a way of getting around them. They just show a really quite nice visual way of what's going on, and this brings the theme into the game. Fundamentally, it's a game of getting treasure and selling it at a great price, but this island really builds the theme of what's going on. In Trias, the mechanics and the theme actually intertwine amazingly well, because you've got a board that's slowly breaking apart and forming new continents, and that's the theme of the game, continental drift and the way continents are formed. And the mechanic is really quite entwined, and the way that you actually build the map or deconstruct the map is actually quite beautiful and clever. And lastly, in the Resistance, the theme of this game is in the way that you play, the interaction between the players. The board is simply there as a reminder of some rules text and some options. It doesn't really serve a huge purpose. The benefit of this is that I can take this on a plane with me and play with friends anywhere, in a hotel or in a backpackers. I struggle to play Railroad Tycoon on a table in my own house. The board in the board game has changed a lot, as you can see. These are only a few examples. As I've said, card games and other games without boards have kind of broken down what it means to be a board game. And it's a whole sort of new industry where there's a lot of new sort of systems and ideas coming out that are maybe breaking down people's ideas of how boards in board games should exist. I think if you told a contemporary board game sort of collector like myself or Colin about sort of a roll and move game where you roll the dice and choose how many spots you go, I think we'd both be a little bit reluctant to give that a go, because everything has evolved so much. You've got all these different options, and these are only a few games in my collection. Another great example of a game is Carcassonne, which is similar to this, where each player plays tiles down, so rather than deconstructing, you construct. There's many great simulations with other maps. There's more worker placement games with maps like this. The role of the board is still somewhat fundamental to board games, but it's changed a lot because it's not really about the physical aspect of the board. It's about the space in which a game is played, and the tools and the mechanics and how they combine to actually create a playing experience and an interface. That interface may be a quite physical, obvious sort of board like this, or it might be just a table space where you know where to lay out cards or tokens. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about board games in this video. If people want, I can do some more for this series, because it's a real passion of mine, and hopefully this might get a few more people interested and see that maybe board games aren't what they sort of expect in their mind. Because I know when I tell people that I enjoy board games, they think that I'm a grown man who still enjoys playing different types of Monopoly, and that I have a cupboard filled with, you know, Transformers Monopoly, Beatles Monopoly, Smurfs Monopoly. I don't have any Monopolies. I have awesome games.